r/AskReddit by Redical. Students of Reddit, what was the reason for why one of your teachers had a breakdown during class? I have a story for this one. A few years ago, I took a class in design theory. It was the pet project of the head of the college, and taught the design principles behind everything from common household objects to room layouts to entire organizations. It was an absolutely brutal class, but uniquely informative. One day, towards the end of the semester, we went over the use of humor in design. The professor spent the entire class talking about how laughter and amusement can be used to engage an audience and change how people see a situation. The whole time, he was laughing, cracking jokes, and good ones, too, and generally making sure the class had a good time. And at the end of the lesson, he told us not to underestimate the power of laughter. After all, it was how he had gotten through the lecture that day. His father had died a couple days prior. He broke down crying after he told us. It's probably the most impactful lecture I've ever attended. That's a very powerful image. I'd imagine that would stay with you for quite some time. The teacher was bullied and disrespected every day. One day an idiot threw a geometry compass and it got stuck on a cork board, like when you do knife throwing, right beside her while she was writing on the board. Instant meltdown. In tears. She left the class and I never saw her again. Can't blame her. She probably thought her life was in danger at this point. Some schools' neighborhoods are very hard. Grade 10 science class. We were taking turns using some kind of lung capacity measuring device. Breathe into a tube and a small plastic ball gets raised by the force of your breathing. Something gets measured somehow. I can't really remember details aside from the plastic ball. Anyway, the teacher takes his turn, apparently trying to show off with how hard he can breathe out. Somehow breaks the measuring device. The teacher goes into a rage after realizing he broke it. Briefly tries to fix it. Gives up. Picks up a metal garbage can and throws it in anger. Storms out of the room and doesn't come back for 10-15 minutes, at which point he returns and acts like nothing happened. It was more bizarre and amusing than anything else. Spirometer. You breathe out, and it roughly measures how much air is flowing past. Used to measure lung function in things like asthma, injury, or prevent pneumonia post-surgery. Source. I worked in a company that made precise electronic spirometers for clinical trials on asthma drugs. The teacher learned that one student cheated on a history essay. After getting this kid suspended for 2 days, repeat offender, she discovered that almost 2/3 RDS of her class in that subject was cheating as well. I don't know what happened after that, but she literally broke down when she found out that my class knew about it. We were in a different subject, so we weren't a part of this scandal. Oh man. I had a class in college for hand drafting construction documents. Basic stuff. I guess it was like the 8th or 9th year the teacher had taught this class, and hadn't really changed the curriculum. So at one point a project got assigned. I ended up being very sick at the time and had some extra time to work on it. Nothing hard, just tedious. The first day I came back, the teacher came in and just ducking unloaded on the class. Apparently a student from a previous semester had given someone their project to copy, and that had gotten passed around, and that project had some noticeable error on it. So when everyone turned in their projects, the teacher quickly noticed that there were tons of copies. The school had a zero tolerance policy on cheating, but I think at the time the department couldn't just drop something like 15 students, so they were all placed on academic probation for a year. I had a similar incident in high school. When she found out nearly everyone had shared the answers to the midterm on Snapchat, she literally had a class the next day telling us why what we did was wrong, and decided to give us another shorter midterm that we only had a period to do. This teacher always seemed tough as nails, so it was a shock when a kid just said she looked like a pit bull. She did have jowls, and she left crying. One of my teachers looked like Pitbull the rapper, but was cool about it. Nice. My girlfriend works with a guy who looks like Pitbull and regulars that come in call him Mr. Worldwide. My math teacher in 8th grade was extremely pregnant and our exchange student from Brazil called her beautiful. She broke down in tears and admitted she didn't feel very pretty. She was a substitute teacher at elementary school, and at some point a kid took it too far and threw a bottle at her. It was an empty plastic bottle, but still, Poor teacher. Sometimes it's not the physical things that hurt you. And sometimes it's a plastic bottle to the face. Teacher hit and killed a student walking on their way to school. At my high school, a student hit and killed an elementary school teacher on his way to school. Then he tried to act tough about it like he thought it was funny. Most people already hated this guy, but this really sealed his fate. Jesus Christ. That's awful. I can't comprehend why someone would act like that. I see why he was already hated. My favorite science teacher in high school was slowly being forced out by administration. One day in class she stopped teaching and sat down in front of us and told us she had just been diagnosed with MS and began sobbing. The entire class got up and gave her a long group hug. It is one of my most cherished memories from that chapter of my life. That's so beautiful. I was diagnosed 6 years ago. It's better now. Not 100% back to normal of course, but oh man, that first year was terrible. I hope she's doing okay now. What have you been doing to make it better? My mum has MS and I would really appreciate finding out about something we hadn't known before. We made our English teacher cry, but we didn't want to, because we really liked her. She was about to switch to another school and she had some really important things to do. She needed to call someone. So she gave us a task to do and left the room for like 5 minutes. We were a horrible class. Around 16/17 at this time, at mainly boys. We had breakfast together that day and stuff was still in the classroom. So the boys decided it was time to throw it around and hit the window with stick of butter, while one boy tried to clean the window using a squeegee. Is that the right word? Never used it before and I'm not native. Someone else decided to throw out the trash. Another teacher came because she saw the trash flying by the window of her classroom and in the moment she stared yelling at us. The other teacher came back. She immediately started crying as she saw what was going on. I think she was angry and overwhelmed because she liked the school and didn't want to leave. But in this moment we were the little a-holes making the decision easier. But the next week, she came into the class and had written a small poem for us about being too old to throw around trash and playing with butter. Too old to play with butter. Maybe to mess around would be more appropriate. Physics teacher came into class late, walked past the podium and walked into the chalkboard. Like, he would have kept walking if it wasn't there. He then picked up one of those plastic pen things that you put chalk in, proceeded to try and write on the chalkboard even though the pen was empty of chalk, all the while mumbling incoherently. Found out later he had a stroke and managed to drive himself to the university. Edit. He didn't return to teaching that year and as best I recall he ended up retiring due to health complications. He was in his 60s and along with the stroke he had fallen and hit his head. Online searching shows he passed away about 8 years later. I had a similar experience in college with a history teacher, but at the time at least it looked like he was just wasted. I still think this was probably the case but several people did check to see if he was okay. I still remember him slurring the Malays of Wilhelmian Germany repeatedly. Everybody just gave up and left after a while. The Malays of Wilhelmian Germany. It's funny because a drunkenly depressed history professor mindlessly scrawling empty words on a chalkboard is as close to the Malays of Wilhelmian Germany as we're gonna get nowadays. Just mumbling something about Gott mit die Kaiser over and over and over and over again, dejectedly, until the dean calls the ducking cops on him. My 8th grade Spanish teacher and the freshman baseball coach were having an affair. It eventually became public knowledge and she had several breakdowns as her divorce played out over the course of my 8th grade year. I had the pleasure of joining the freshman baseball team the next year and experiencing his own share of breakdowns from his own divorce. I had 2 teachers who were married and went to my church. They were both super nice and some PF my favorite teachers. One was my homeroom PE health teacher in 8th grade and the other was my English teacher in freshman year. They split my 8th grade year. And it was really sad. You could tell both of them were on the verge of breakdowns the majority of the time. I hope they're doing better. My university physics professor got the call that his dog had died right before a test. Needless to say, we didn't have a test that day. Oh, when a dog dies, I always get sad, regardless whose dog it is. There was this science teacher already on the verge of a breakdown. We called her Molecule. Someone wrote that on a leaf of one of the plants in the class and she started crying and pretty much had a breakdown. When people endure bullshit for too long, they can completely fall apart over the seemingly smallest, silliest things. It's like the Ruthie episode of BoJack, where Princess Carolyn has a day brimming with awful experiences, and the thing that makes her cry is finding out that her necklace was fake. Oh man, that episode. One time in math class the emo girl was not having it. I don't even remember how it got started, but she ended up bickering with the teacher and the emo girl called the teacher Thunder Tits. It was at this point that the emo girl was sent to the office and the teacher had to take a seat at her desk in the back for a few minutes. Thunder Tits and lightning. Very, very frightening. If I were that teacher I absolutely would have sent her to the office, because you kind of have to keep control. And then I'd either sat in the back for a few minutes, but mostly because that's one of the funniest things to call someone, and I would have been desperately trying not to laugh in front of the group of students I was in charge of. My JH biology teacher legit used to have weird ass flashbacks of when he fought at Vietnam. Shit was pretty sad to see. We had a substitute teacher that would make all students in the class pop open their metal binder rings in unison. Otherwise, the sound of multiple binders rings opening at different times would remind of him artillery sounds. We had a middle school teacher who also suffered from PTSD from serving in Vietnam. Poor guy didn't like loud noises. He'd take cover if someone slammed a book on a desk. Sadly, the Dongwood shit sticks in my school knew this and routinely did this for their own entertainment. The one that sticks out is my history teacher, who was a level 10 incompetent at anything. She usually blathered on through class about stupid things. She was always very well put together, dressed well, hair done. It's just there was no substance to her teaching or conversational topics. One day, she started talking about a co-worker she was very close to when she was young. Mind you, she had to be approaching her 60s. The story started out innocent enough where we were all basically ignoring her, and pretty soon it veered off into this terrible reality. Her co-worker had gone home from work and died in a car accident on the way home. This had to have been 30 years ago. She was crying, saying how much she missed her and how crazy life can be. The way she explained the story was so sad, too. They had made plans the following day, and my teacher was excitedly waiting for that co-worker to come in. I disliked that teacher immensely, but I felt so sorry for her. She stood there, crying because her friend was gone. I don't think at 15 I could imagine that sort of loneliness or pain. But now, a good 15 years later, I've had her experiences, and I sympathize with her. Damn, this one really got to me for some reason. That's so damn sad. My history government teacher has been to Vietnam, and it's quite known that he was on the front lines. So in the middle of a lecture a girl raised her hand and asked, "Have you ever killed someone?" The question caused him to go silent and leave the room for quite a while. Luckily the girl was ripped a new a-hole by her fellow classmates. Same exact thing happened with my Hist Gov teacher. He was the best teacher and gave a great lecture when it came time to discussing the real Vietnam War, how he overcame his alcoholism and still struggles with PTSD. Our teacher was a puffed up National Guardsman who almost never left his home state, and he allowed kids to call him by his rank instead of Mr. My best friend caused the school librarian to lose it because she thought she caught him masturbating in the non-fiction section. Edit. For clarification, the librarian accused my friend of masturbating in said section of the school library. He has denied all allegations and refuses to answer any more questions on the matter. Well, at least he was keeping it real, am I right? Not my teacher, but my younger sisters at the time. The class was making fun of her recent miscarriage and her mum dying of cancer. Yes, teenagers are cruel. Thanks for watching this Reddit video. Subscribe for the best Reddit videos straight to your feed every day.